On August 21, 2025, Canada stunned North America by announcing an immediate total suspension of all steel exports to the United States. This unexpected decision sent shockwaves through the continent, leaving industries scrambling to understand the implications. This wasn't a tariff or a negotiation tactic, it was a complete shutdown, instantly severing a vital artery of the continent's supply chain. The abrupt halt left many wondering how long this would last and what the long-term effects might be. For decades, American industries, especially automakers, depended on a steady flow of Canadian steel. This reliable supply chain was the backbone of many manufacturing processes, ensuring that production lines ran smoothly and efficiently. The Canadian government blamed years of aggressive U.S. trade practices and unpredictable tariffs for destabilizing its steel industry. These actions had created an environment of uncertainty, making it difficult for Canadian producers to plan for the future. Trucks carrying specialized steel were turned away at the border, halting just-in-time manufacturing across the Midwest. This disruption threatened to ripple through the economy, affecting not just the auto industry but countless other sectors reliant on steel. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement was supposed to prevent this, but Canada's move signaled a profound breakdown in trust. The agreement, once hailed as a triumph of diplomacy, now seemed fragile and inadequate in the face of such drastic actions. The American auto industry, with no stockpiles or reserves, was plunged into chaos overnight. Workers faced uncertainty, and companies scrambled to find alternative sources of steel, a task easier said than done. Boardrooms scrambled, factories idled, and the world watched as a once unbreakable trade partnership fractured in real time. The situation was a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of global trade and the fragility of international agreements. This was more than a trade dispute, it was an economic shockwave with no clear end in sight. Economists warned of potential long-term impacts, and markets reacted with volatility, reflecting the uncertainty of the situation. The question on everyone's mind: what comes next? As the world watched, the future of North American trade relations hung in the balance, with potential consequences that could reshape the economic landscape for years to come. This crisis didn't erupt overnight, it was years in the making. Tensions began with the U.S. imposing steep tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, citing national security. Canada, deeply integrated with U.S. manufacturing, saw this as a betrayal. The threat of new tariffs never disappeared, creating constant uncertainty for businesses on both sides. Retaliatory tariffs followed, escalating the economic friction and eroding decades of cooperation. The U.S. used tariffs as leverage in unrelated disputes, deepening Canadian frustration. Behind closed doors, a final U.S. threat of harsher sanctions pushed Canada to the breaking point. Ottawa's steel export ban was a desperate move to force a reset in the relationship. It was the culmination of a long, painful cycle of economic conflict. The ban was not just about steel, it was about reclaiming control. The American car industry felt the impact immediately, as a sense of disbelief and anxiety swept through factory floors and executive offices alike. The hum of machinery faded, replaced by uneasy silence and worried glances. By noon, assembly lines at Ford, GM, and Stellantis ground to a halt as the last shipments of Canadian steel ran out. The sudden stoppage was unprecedented, catching even seasoned industry veterans off guard. Without the specialized grades from Canada, production stopped cold. No quick substitutes, no easy fixes. The unique properties of Canadian steel were essential for safety and performance, and no domestic or foreign supplier could fill the gap on short notice. Thousands of workers were sent home, and the just-in-time system that once drove efficiency now exposed the industry's vulnerability. The ripple effect was immediate, with entire shifts canceled and paychecks suddenly in jeopardy. Stock prices for automakers plummeted, and suppliers up and down the chain were forced to shut down. Investors panicked as the news spread, and the financial shockwaves reached far beyond Detroit. Executives scrambled for alternatives, but sourcing steel from overseas would take weeks and cost far more. Logistics teams worked around the clock, but the global supply chain was already stretched thin, and shipping delays were inevitable. The entire automotive ecosystem, workers, suppliers, and communities, was thrown into crisis. Small businesses that depended on the plants faced closure, and families in auto towns braced for uncertain futures. The industry's Achilles heel was exposed: efficiency without resilience. What once seemed like a perfectly tuned system now revealed its fragility. as a single missing link brought everything to a standstill. The shutdown wasn't due to lack of demand or labor, but the sudden loss of its most basic material. The entire supply chain, from raw materials to finished vehicles, was paralyzed by the steel shortage. The great engine of American automaking had seized up overnight, leaving a once bustling industry eerily quiet and uncertain about what the future would hold. For American consumers, the crisis hit home fast. New car inventories vanished from dealership lots within days, driving prices sky high. Used car prices soared as buyers scrambled for alternatives, turning a family necessity into a luxury. Popular models became impossible to find, and buyers faced long waits or settled for less desired vehicles. The shock rippled through households, families faced impossible choices, and the dream of a new car slipped out of reach. Economic anxiety spread, with fears of recession and job losses mounting. The auto industry's paralysis sent a clear message: trade disputes have real, personal costs. The sticker shock at dealerships was just the beginning. Ordinary Americans were now paying the price for a political standoff. For auto workers, the crisis was personal and immediate. The shutdowns didn't just threaten their paychecks, they threatened their sense of security, their routines, and their futures. Each day brought new uncertainty, and the fear of what tomorrow might hold weighed heavily on everyone walking out those factory gates. Maria Flores, a veteran assembly line worker, summed it up. "We've survived strikes and downturns, but never a shutdown like this. This time it feels different, like the ground has shifted beneath our feet. I have a mortgage, kids. This isn't politics, it's my life." For Maria and thousands like her, the crisis wasn't just about lost wages. It was about the fear of losing homes, the anxiety of not being able to provide for their families, and the heartbreak of seeing years of hard work suddenly at risk. Small business owners like David Chen, who relied on Canadian steel, faced layoffs and the threat of closure. Their businesses, built over decades, now stood on the brink, with every day of the dispute pushing them closer to the edge. "A few weeks of this could end my business," he said. For David, the crisis was a test of survival, with employees' livelihoods and his own dreams hanging in the balance. At dealerships, buyers like Mark and Sarah Jenkins were priced out of the market. The cars they'd hoped to buy were suddenly out of reach, and the excitement of a new purchase turned into disappointment and frustration. "We saved for years, but now the only car left is $10,000 over sticker. We feel stuck." For many families, dreams were put on hold, and the sense of being powerless in the face of rising prices was overwhelming. Across the country, workers felt abandoned, business owners trapped, and consumers exploited. The ripple effects of the crisis reached every corner of the community, leaving no one untouched. The crisis exposed the fragility of livelihoods tied to global supply chains. What once seemed like a distant problem was now a harsh reality, as shortages and delays became part of daily life. For many, it was a harsh lesson in how distant policy decisions can devastate local communities. The connection between global events and local hardship had never been clearer. The sense of betrayal and helplessness was palpable. People who had always played by the rules now felt let down by a system they thought would protect them. The trade dispute was no longer abstract. It was a daily struggle for millions. Every dinner table conversation, every news report was a reminder of the uncertainty and hardship. Voices from the factory floor, small shops, and dealership lots painted a vivid picture of the human cost. Their stories echoed across the nation, demanding to be heard. The pain was real, and the anger was growing. Communities rallied together, demanding action and accountability from those in power. The crisis had become a national reckoning. Americans demanded answers and solutions. The call for change was louder than ever, as the nation faced a turning point in its economic story. As factories idled, political tempers flared. The U.S. president called Canada's move a stab in the back, vowing swift retaliation. Canada's prime minister stood firm, insisting the ban was necessary after years of U.S. trade aggression. Diplomatic channels froze, ambassadors were recalled, and lawmakers on both sides traded barbs. The dispute dominated headlines, fueling nationalism and deepening divisions. What should have been resolved quietly became a public spectacle of political grandstanding. Both leaders dug in, making compromise harder. The war of words poisoned goodwill, pushing a solution further out of reach. The speed of the crisis was unprecedented. Canada's decision, executed in hours, exposed the vulnerability of just-in-time supply chains. There was no buffer, factories stopped as soon as the steel did. Policymakers underestimated how quickly a single action could shatter an entire industry. Technology accelerated the collapse, news spread instantly, stocks crashed, and logistics systems froze. The crisis was a stark lesson in the fragility of global interdependence. In the digital age, a trade dispute can become an industrial meltdown overnight. The system's efficiency became its undoing. As the dust settles, North America faces a crossroads. De-escalation and renewed diplomacy are urgently needed, but trust has been deeply damaged. A temporary truce could restart steel flows, but lasting solutions require rebuilding the rules of trade. Businesses will rethink supply chains, adding redundancy to guard against future shocks. The risk of similar disputes over other commodities remains high unless both nations change course. The precedent is set. Economic levers can and will be used as weapons. The era of assuming trade is immune to politics is over. North America's prosperity now depends on leaders rediscovering shared interests and mutual respect. Without that, this crisis could mark the start of deeper economic fractures. The choice: rebuild the bridge or watch the divide grow.